Hi, I'm Molly Cheshire, and tonight's guests are Michael Swag and Jonathan Levin. Correct?
That's it.
Okay, okay, I just wasn't sure. And you guys have made a fabulous movie about the Iraqi U.S. Labor Solidarity Tour. I just
Right.
wanted to get it right. I
Right.
saw it, I was very impressed, and I just wanted to get how you got interested in this and why you think it's important.
Well, the film is called Meeting Face to Face, the Iraq U.S. Labor Solidarity Tour, and it documents a trip to the United States of 6 senior Iraqi labor leaders who came to the U.S. in June of 2005. And I was involved in inviting them and bringing them here. Uh, they were sponsored by U.S. Labor Against the War, which is a coalition of labor unions in the U.S. that are opposed to the war in Iraq and trying to build a peace movement within working people, among working people in the U.S. And we thought that one of the most important things we could do is to bring Iraqi workers here, bring Iraqi people here, because we never hear from Iraqis.
Right, and what I thought was most interesting is that I didn't realize that the unions are still illegal
In
even
Iraq.
after the occupation.
Yeah, that was one law from Saddam Hussein's era that the U.S. kept on the books
Why?
because the people who run this country don't like unions here, and they sure don't like them in Iraq or anywhere else. And so one of the things that we wanted to highlight, actually to workers here, is that working people in Iraq have problems which we can relate to here, and that one reason why workers here should be opposed to the war in Iraq is because it is being pursued, that war, by the
Right.
same people who are giving workers a hard time here.
I mean, I didn't realize that. I mean, it seems like if you get the AFL-CIO on your side, that's a big deal.
That was a big deal.
How did you manage to?
Well, what happened again was that in July of 2005, the AFL-CIO had a national convention. They do it every 4 years, and this was a big deal. And workers and union representatives from all over the country came to that. And in preparation for that, U.S. Labor Against the War was trying to get resolutions passed so that the labor movement as a whole would oppose the war, pass a resolution. And to help prepare that, one thing to do was to bring the Iraqi workers here, tour them around the country, make them available to workers and to unions, so that people would learn and that the Iraqis themselves wanted the war to end. As vulnerable as they are, they thought and they think that we should get out. The U.S. should end the occupation, and it will make their life easier, although not easy.
What happens if? I mean, I think that what people in America are worried about is that sort of genocide is going to result between the Sunnis and the Shiites if we do pull out. I mean, how are they going to deal with that?
Well, this is one of the things that these Iraqis spoke about.
Right.
And they talked about the importance of ending the occupation, because the occupation is what is fomenting that civil war. For example, the U.S. Supports these Shia militia and brings them into Sunni areas as a police force. And so that right away promotes conflict.
Right. I mean, do you
And
think they do this on purpose?
yes,
But I mean,
yes, they do.
why?
Because they want to divide and rule, and the U.S. occupation forces are making trouble for the Iraqi people, and the Iraqi workers came here and spoke about it, and we made this film because we wanted to make sure that the comments that they were making and the insights that they had would be available to a broader public after they left.
Why do you think the mainstream media hasn't covered any of this?
Well, it's a complicated story, I'm sure. I don't really understand all that's going on with the
I mean,
mainstream media.
have you gotten any coverage with this film or with the labor movement?
The labor movement, for example, the fact that the AFL-CIO passed a resolution last July at their national convention opposing the war in Iraq, for the first time opposing an American war during wartime, the American labor movement in modern history, was in no paper anywhere in the country.
That just amazes me.
Except in the labor press.
Right.
It was just not a story for the mainstream media. Well, we decided that we have to have some alternative media and a voice that could be made available, and so appreciate being on this show to talk about it. And I, through the Center for Study of Working Class Life that I direct at the University at Stony Brook, produced this, and I came to Jonathan and asked him to be the filmmaker and to direct it and
what was
oversee
your experience, on any of these issues that I'm talking about? Like, doesn't it surprise you that the mainstream media is just ignoring all of this?
Not at all. Not even a little bit. There seems to be countless examples of incredibly relevant, important, newsworthy stories that should be covered and certainly are not covered time and time again. So personally, I'm not surprised. I'm outraged, but not surprised.
I mean, do you think that's because of sort of the fascist regime that we have ruling the country now, or is this just
probably
a general
something along those lines
thing that would have happened even sort of under the Clinton administration?
I mean, I'm not a media expert, but my sense is not as likely to have happened during a Clinton administration as now. I mean, it's pretty clear that the way that the relationship between this administration and the press is sort of a little unprecedented in the, on the one hand, control that the administration seems to have either directly or indirectly through a variety of mechanisms, but which has translated into an extremely complacent and defanged press.
I mean, it seems to me it's somewhat self-censorship. Is the way I can see it. Because, okay, for example, I mean, were you an activist during the 60s?
Yes.
It seemed to me that there was a lot of press on the anti-war movement in the 60s.
Well, actually, there was a lot that wasn't covered. And for years, there was really no substantial press. There was some press when there were huge demonstrations, and there was some press
when people got killed.
When people got killed at Kent State, there was also, and there was also press when there were demonstrations at draft boards and blood was thrown on the files and things of that sort. But
I think the difference then is that if they instituted a draft now, we would have the same kind of reaction.
Well, there would be more, a broader opposition. I think that's true. But what we were trying to do with this film, with Meeting Face to Face, which people can see, they go to the website for it, meetingfacetoface.org, and they can.
Can you handle showing a close-up of the?
Yes.
So.
Keep talking.
So Meeting Face to Face is the name of the film.
Right.
And we made this so that people would get the voices that they never hear from Iraqis and also from the American labor movement.
And what do you think the implications are? Did you get it, Paul?
Keep going.
What do you think the implications are that could possibly result from making this movie and having it shown? Let's say it was shown in all the markets in the U.S.
Well, I think that people would learn things, and we mean it as an education tool. We mean it as something that people will learn from, because there's so little that's available to us with real information and with real voices that hasn't been homogenized through the corporate media.
I mean, do you really think that if we pulled out right now, what do you think would happen?
I think if we pulled out right now or initiated a process, you can't pull out 150,000 troops in 3 days. Right. So it would take 6 or 8 months, and you would systematically withdraw the troops. You would let the Iraqis know that this was actually going to happen and that it was up to them to have a government that would be legitimate in their eyes because it was not backed by the American military. Right. There's no way that any Iraqi government, no matter how it's constituted, can have legitimacy with the Iraqi people if you've got an American military officer who's in the meetings of every ministry, of every battalion, and every company of Iraqi soldiers. It's not an independent place, and the Iraqis know that. They're not fools.
But the interesting thing is that, I mean, just like Hamas just got into power in Palestine.
Yes.
I think that's kind of every military, advisor or, the administration's worst fear.
Well, I think that this administration is trying to find a compliant government in Iraq.
Well, that's who they had with Saddam. I mean,
Well,
we got Saddam into power in the first
that's
place.
true, and that got a little complicated, but
And he wasn't quite so compliant as they thought.
at the moment, the Iraqis are trying to get the U.S. out so that they can get on about their business, making their own country and reconstituting it. Now, the U.S. has an obligation, I think, to the Iraqi people, which can be satisfied by reparations payments. We destroyed the country. It can't be rebuilt by the American military. It can't be rebuilt by American contractors, defended by American military.
I think we can take this down now.
It needs to be reconstructed by the Iraqis, and the U.S. can, if we pull out, the war is costing us $100 billion a year. So let's say we give the Iraqis $50 billion, and we keep the $50 billion as a peace dividend, and they have resources to rebuild their country. They have engineers, they have workers, they have all kinds of technical competence. They can do it. They don't need American contractors taking their jobs.
Right. No, I totally agree. I just wonder, wouldn't it make sense that another strongman would just step into power since they're not used to
Maybe.
democracy?
That's up to the Iraqis to sort out.
Okay, let's say we had never gone to Iraq, right? And Saddam was still in power. Do you think Iraq would be better off?
I don't know. It's up to the Iraqis to figure out what they want with their country.
Well, that's a good point.
And it's really not for us to say, oh, wouldn't it be better if X happens? So, oh, let's go make X happen, and let's go send the
Right.
Marines in there to make it happen. You can't run a country that way. You can't run other people's countries that way. And it's such a waste of life and such a waste of resources. And it really is something which is absolutely unsupportable. And American workers and the American people don't support it.
Right.
And what we see here in this in this film with Meeting Face to Face is American working people speaking out and learning and making contact with
I mean,
Iraqis.
it seems like we don't support these things, and yet, it seemed like Bush got more support the second time around than he did the first time.
Let's see.
I don't understand. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. But so anyway, what was your experience directing?
Karl Rove is a very skilled campaigner.
Right.
Very skilled campaigner. A lot of people who you would never expect to have voted for a conservative Republican voted for a conservative Republican.
Right.
Largely on the on religious and moral values grounds, which was a very skilled effort that they pulled off. But
I mean, I think it's very interesting that the AFL-CIO is really supporting this. I mean, to me,
It's very
that
significant.
is significant.
It's extremely significant that the AFL-CIO, as a federation, has passed a resolution calling for the rapid withdrawal of all American forces from Iraq and calling for the defense of Iraqi workers to organize their own independent and free trade unions.
Do you
That
think
has
that's
never
going to
happened.
have an effect?
It already has had an effect.
So what has been the upshot since you guys have made this movie?
Well, for example, the tour itself
Right.
resulted in a new cooperative working relations among the Iraqi unions themselves. So when they got back to Iraq, they are stronger in their ability to push back, for example, that law that makes unions illegal.
Right.
That's no longer enforced in Baghdad.
Oh.
The Baghdad Iraqi municipal administration has agreed that they aren't going to enforce that because the unions in Iraq have now gotten enough strength and enough legitimacy to secure that benefit. Well, that's an important thing, and that happened in part as a result of bringing all those workers here to the United States, touring them around, getting the support of the American labor movement, getting the support of the American people behind them. So when they go back to Iraq, they're not as isolated.
Right.
And they are international figures. And the fact that we have a film that shows them speaking, this film, Meeting Face to Face,
Right.
allows people to see that there is a connection between what's going on in Iraq and what's going on here, and that workers in this country do have an interest and are acting on an interest to support their brothers and sisters in Iraq.
Did you have any reaction from the Bush administration?
No.
As far as this?
No.
No. Did you even approach them?
No, the only approach we made was to try to get the Iraqis visas, and which wasn't so easy, because the U.S. has a big embassy in the Green Zone in Iraq that we have 3,000 people who work, and it's the biggest embassy in the world. If you're an Iraqi national, you cannot go to that embassy to apply for a visa to come to America. You have to go to Amman. You have to leave Iraq because the Americans won't allow Iraqis into the American embassy.
Why? Because they're afraid?
Yeah, they're afraid. So these Iraqis had to go all the way to Jordan to apply and then to have their interview and then to pick up the visas. They had to go 3 times. And they came anyway. And that drive...
Why is there such a large embassy in Iraq?
Well,
who's using it? We're using it.
We're running the country.
Right.
And so, we have a lot of people there. But they don't ever go out of the Green Zone.
Right.
That's one of the things that we found out in the film. We have Robert Fisk, for example, who's a journalist from England, who reports what is known in England. It's not known so much in the United States. Reporters don't go out of the Green Zone. They can't go out. They're afraid.
Right.
By and large.
By and large. I mean, some do. But for the most part, the American press is reporting from inside. They're embedded. They're from inside the military. They're inside the diplomatic cocoon. And that was so important to bring these Iraqis to the United States, these workers who are machinists and they're, transport workers, and bring them here so that they can actually explain what is going on the ground there.
So what's the next step?
For whom?
Just in general. I mean, this movie will help to a certain extent, if people see it. I mean, do we have to write our congressman, or
write our congressman and get our unions to join U.S. Labor Against the War and participate and devote resources to building this peace movement, whether you're in a union or in the churches or in the synagogues or wherever you are, to take up this question at schools, universities.
I sort of always ask. I find a lot of this information a little overwhelming because you sort of feel powerless to do anything, especially if it's not getting out in the mainstream media and nobody seems to be listening or doing anything, and things like this. It seems like with the block of the U.S. labor unions at least supporting it, then you feel like there's a huge part of the segment of American society that someone might listen to. But as an individual, what can you really do?
Well, as an individual, you can get involved in your organizations, whether it is in your union or whether it is in your church or whether it is in your neighborhood community.
On your campus.
Brooklyn Parents for Peace, on campus, students organizing.
And you really think that makes a difference?
Oh, yeah.
Helped in Vietnam, right?
And it's helping now in creating a climate in which the majority of American people oppose the war.
Right.
And that has
Once
consequences.
You get a groundswell
that has
going.
Consequences. Another thing that's going on in the high schools is that there's a lot of effort to stop military recruiters from coming onto campuses or into high schools and drawing off the young people into the military.
I can't imagine anyone wanting to volunteer to go
Well,
to Iraq.
there is a thing called the economic draft. We don't have a draft in the way that we had in Vietnam.
Right.
But there are an awful lot of young men and women who don't have prospects. They can't go to college. They can't afford it. They don't have a job or prospect of a job that has health care.
Yeah, but
and here comes the Army
McDonald's
and says...
or dying. I don't know. It's just kind of a no-brainer.
There's still a lot of people out there, a lot of young people who still believe that this is a noble cause, that we're bringing democracy to the world. I mean, it is hard for many of us to believe that some people think like that, but some people still do, even now, because where they get their opinions from is mainstream tube, and that message has not changed.
And a lot of people are just desperate. People, there's a lot of dangerous jobs. You can work in a coal mine, and that's a dangerous job. You might say, who in the world would ever want to go into a mine? But people do. And who would ever want to go and join the military? Well, people do, because they think that it's righteous, or because they maybe don't agree with the war in particular, but they're going to do it anyway because it's a way out of their communities.
My grandfather was a general, so I know all about all this stuff. But this war seems to be completely unjustified
Well,
from the beginning.
the war
It's illegal.
is, and I think what Jonathan said a minute ago, a lot of people, a lot of young people don't totally know all what's going on. Where do they get their information? It is a way out. It is a career. The recruiters come. But to say something on behalf of the young people of this country, recruiters are not meeting their quotas. They're going into the schools
Right.
and they're running their rap, and the young people are saying,
What happens
"I'm
when
not
nobody
going."
wants to go?
They have a problem.
I mean, do you think that the
The
draft
military has a problem.
is gonna
No,
happen?
I don't think they're going to bring back the draft, the selective service. Not anytime soon.
I think we'd have a revolution.
I don't think that politically, I don't think that they are prepared to do that.
But
What we're doing with this film for young people in the high schools, for example, or for people in unions or in churches or community groups, is to have something where they could have a house party, let's say, where you could bring some friends together and say, well, let's look at this thing and talk about it. And then there are resources that you can go to. There are links to other organizations.
So your link, and you can access it and
Through
watch
that
the
website.
trailer
Yeah,
and-
meetingfacetoface.org, all one string, meetingfacetoface.org. And there you can see the trailer. You can buy it. It's $9.95. It's priced to be out in the world
Right.
so that people can really use
So
it.
what was your interaction with the guys that came over? Because
With the Iraqis?
Yeah, I really liked them.
Well, they were really interesting, and they were real people, and they were very serious about their commitment to their own members, to their constituency. And I thought that they were very astute in their political evaluations of things. They weren't Pollyannish, They weren't saying, "Oh, get out, everything will be wonderful." They were saying, "Get out" as the first step of a very difficult future, because they understand that they have a very complex situation.
I mean, it seemed to me that they hadn't been in effect, during Saddam. I mean, how long was Saddam in power for? Like 20 years.
23,
Anyway,
24 years.
What did they do? They all went into hiding or something, or
A
they
lot
had
of them were
illegal-
underground. They were illegal.
illegal
They were
unions?
underground. They were in exile. They were in jail. They had a variety of different experiences. And then when Saddam fell, they came out and started organizing right away. And as one of the.
I mean, to me, it takes a lot of courage to do that.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
this is not just Sally Field and all that kind of stuff. This is
No,
the
this
real
is the
deal.
this is the real deal. That's definitely, and that's why we wanted people to hear from them, and why we think it's so important that people
I mean, I
have
kind of
access to
wanted
this
to know
information.
more profiling on all their individual sort of.
Well, on the website, actually, there's background information on each of the 6 Iraqis who came. So if you go to meetingfacetoface.org,
Oh, good.
then and you'll to about this film.
Because they had different ages, and
Yeah.
one looked like sort of like Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, they're all different people. They're very different, and
And then one was sort of a young guy. He was slick and fun, and he was sort of, I don't know, Mr. Good Guy.
yeah, well, there's a broad range of experience there, and also of opinions. They weren't all agreeing on everything.
Right.
As we know in this country, the labor movement isn't all agreed on everything. There's divisions and differences of opinion.
Right. I mean, I was in the IATSE union, and so I like the union and don't like the union for lots of different reasons.
Well, those differences make it all the more impressive that these labor leaders were able to agree unanimously on this statement that came at the end, which was the U.S. should get out immediately, that the immediate end for the
I'm
occupation.
sure that wasn't difficult to come to a unanimous.
It wasn't, but the fact is that it is amazing, I think, to a lot of Americans that would be the position of the Iraqis.
Right.
Who
Right,
you
I
might
mean-
say, oh, well, America should be here to protect us while we get our act together because it's too dangerous if America would leave. They're not saying that.
So we have couple of minutes left here, and do you have anything that either of you would like to say, sort of wrapping up, or that you didn't feel like you got a chance to say?
Well, it's just really important to acknowledge what an regular Iraqi person on the inside of Iraq has to say. That all we have had to go by is filtered information, through
Right.
mainstream media, secondhand reports of various kinds, through all kinds of filters. And now that you're actually hearing firsthand, face-to-face from these people, they don't represent every single Iraqi person, but by and large, they're a pretty good cross-section of what Iraqis feel. I think one has to really give their point of view a lot of weight when you're considering how you should feel about the matter. And that's what we were really trying to hope to do with this.
Well, I really appreciate you guys coming, and I really hope that makes a difference.
Thank you. This kind of exposure is what we really hope would happen, and that people would use it, people would see it and want to tell other people about it, and use it as an education tool.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Molly Cheshire and Jonathan Levin and Michael Zweig, and it's meeting face to face.
Oh, just
No, don't worry about it. The Iraqi-U.S. Labor Solidarity Tour.
That's
Thanks
it.
again.
Thank you.
it just looks nice. Okay.
The terrorists have made it clear that Iraq is the central front in their war against humanity. And so we must recognize Iraq as the central front in the war on terror. As we fight the enemy in Iraq, every man and woman who volunteers to defend our nation deserves an unwavering commitment to the mission.
Americans are trying to understand if it is true that we should pursue this mission that costs so many lives and so much money. We're trying to understand the realities of the war in Iraq, but what do we have to go by? The media present one picture, but what do we know about the realities of day-to-day life for Iraqis in this war, what they think about the occupation, and what that means for what Americans should do?
The ambivalence that many people in America today feel about how to resolve this situation stems from not understanding fully life as it is being lived today by Iraqi citizens.
It's a whole lot of guesswork just because the media sources have been, so poor and we haven't really heard firsthand accounts and information.
Overwhelmingly, what we see are images of war and the occupation and the violence. And while that is a great and tremendous aspect of what life in Iraq is like, you can't forget that Iraq is a big country of 24 million people, ordinary working people like you and like me.
Whatever you hear or whatever you see in the media, the corporate media, that's what I mean. It is just to picture the Iraqi people are the aggressive people, religious fanatic who have nothing to do but to kill to solve their problem. This is absolutely wrong.
There is a force in Iraq, a third element, that's most of the people who want a democratic, independent society that is not under American domination. That voice is the voice of Iraqi working people.
نريد أن نقول لهم إن القوى المتمددة.
The progressive movement and the secular movement do exist, and we represent that movement.
Unions in Iraq have a long history. They've been there in organized form since the 1920s. Under Saddam, independent unions were crushed, and after 1987, unions in the public sector were illegal. In the oil industry, in transportation, healthcare, 80% of Iraqi workers couldn't have unions. Their leaders were in jail, in exile, or underground. When Saddam fell in May 2003, union leaders came out of hiding and Iraqi workers began organizing again. But the U.S. occupation kept in force that 1987 law making public sector unions illegal. Still, without any legal protections and over the opposition of U.S. occupation forces, by the end of 2005, Iraqi unions represented over 300,000 workers in the oil and other public and private sector industries. U.S. Labor Against the War brings together unions, labor federations, and other worker organizations, and first met in January 2003 to oppose the run-up to the Iraq War.
We made a decision to send a delegation to Iraq, and it was part of the first international delegation of labor that anywhere in the world that visited Iraq. And we realized that the Iraqi labor movement was being created day by day at an amazing pace. That was extremely powerful moment. It helped to sort of create a feeling that, my God, these are textile workers, we're textile workers. These are hospital workers and transport workers, railroad workers, and so are we.
The trip to Iraq forged solidarity and set into motion what would become the first delegation of Iraqi labor leaders ever, in peace or war, to visit the United States.
In order for the average worker to actually understand what it means to talk to an Iraqi, they had to see him face to face. We decided that the single most important thing we could do to get the labor movement's attention was to bring the Iraqi trade unionists here.
Welcome, union member. We are in your presence. We are in your presence. Hand in hand together. Hand in hand together. We make the union strong. Hand in hand together. Welcome.
We decided that we had to bring a broad representation of the Iraqi trade union movement. So we brought 3 of the main federations.
And we're really happy to meet you guys.
That's unbelievable.
It's very beautiful.
We are very committed to supporting your struggle for a free and prosperous Iraq. And we decided that it was extremely important for workers in this country to hear the voice of Iraqi workers. Your voice in your words.
نحتاج فعلا إلى هكذا منظمات تأيد نشاط شعبنا
yours to support our people and our workers.
لكي ننقل صورة الحقيقية لشعبنا اللي
In
هو
a way we will be able to reflect the real picture of our people.
يتطلع إلى الديمقراطية ويتطلع إلى الحرية ويتطلع إلى العيش الكريم.
And to live with dignity.
I feel extremely inspired by your struggle, your commitment, and your refusal to quit the fight. And that's very exciting.
The structure of the tour is that the Iraqis come together, all 6, to Washington, D.C. They spend 5 days in Washington, D.C., talking to senior labor leaders, including John Sweeney, president of the AFL-CIO. They meet with other senior labor leaders who are in Washington. They meet with community groups. They meet with Congress and have a congressional briefing. And then they split up into 3 different tours. The Iraqi Federation of Trade Unions travel on the East Coast. The oil workers are traveling on the West Coast, while the Federation of Workers' Councils and Unions in Iraq travel in the Midwest. They travel to 25 different cities among those 3 tours.
The moment of Saddam's fall, when the statue fell, this was the happiest moment for the Iraqi people. Still, there is a bitter dissatisfaction that this statue did not fall by the hands of the Iraqis. Everyone wished the end of Saddam, but not the beginning of an occupation.
In a country like Iraq, which has suffered from repeated foreign interventions, repeated occupations in the 20th century alone, the degree of sensitivity to this issue is so high that keeping foreign forces there in the long term is basically out of the question.
He said, my message to the soldiers, you came here to remove Saddam, you removed him, get out of here.
وكما تعلمون أن القوات الأمريكية والبريطانية عند دخولها العراق
As you know, when the British and American forces came and invaded Iraq,
قامت بتدمير كل شيء.
They have destroyed everything.
After 2 years, 27 months precisely of occupation, the situation in Iraq and the current condition is getting worse and worse.
Apart from the Kurdistan area, Iraq is now in a state of total anarchy and chaos. No roads are safe outside Baghdad. Much of Baghdad is in insurgent hands. Out in the streets, where few of us go, it is hell on earth.
I am shocked to acknowledge that 2.5 years after the American occupation, that unions are just as illegal today as they were under Saddam Hussein.
The labor unions don't even have any legal legitimacy. When you lay out your demands, the employers threaten you and intimidate you because the unions are illegitimate.
When the workers went on strike and these workers were faced or were confronted by the National Guards who raided the factory and opened fire, injured 4 of them, arrested 10 of them.
We believe that it is the role of any progressive and secular movement in Iraq to end the occupation now.
Ending any form of occupation and guaranteeing the sovereignty of Iraq is a goal that all Iraqis agree on.
That surprised me. That surprised me that the occupation would be the paramount thought of the labor unions, as if the occupation did not exist, we can get on with our business.
Not only is it wrong what's happening to the Iraqi people, it's wrong how American resources are being diverted from other needed programs in this country.
The war is really being fought to give more power and more influence throughout the world to the same corporate elite in this country is giving workers a hard time on every item on the agenda. Many Americans, including people who opposed the 2003 invasion, are now reluctant to call for withdrawal of U.S. forces because they believe that only the U.S. military is able to reestablish security and keep Iraq from descending into chaos and civil war.
It is not possible to do the occupation right. In my view, the problem, in very large measure, is the occupation itself, is the idea that the United States can restructure Iraq, that the United States can create security in Iraq. That's not the case. The United States cannot and will not do that, no matter how long they work at it.
We now have a situation in Iraq where there is a full-scale insurgency by both Shiites and Sunnis against Western forces. Once an insurgency of that kind starts in a Muslim country, it is impossible to quench it.
And I say that straight to President Bush. Leave our country alone.
If, say, the United States decided to pull out of there soon, and just left, what would happen?
We believe that the full withdrawal of the U.S. troops is the very first or the major condition to re-establish the security and stability. All these powers who, even though they are killing and they are participating in the violence, were freed after the occupation started.
The future of Iraq will be built by the Iraqi people. When the occupation forces leave, we will have our own security apparatus and our own resources to settle any differences.
Let the Americans get out of Iraq, then we may fight, then we will reconcile and we will talk and we will be brothers again.
I thought it was absolutely fascinating to hear tonight that, in fact, the U.S. Occupation is inciting sectarianism and inciting sort of the racial and ethnic and religious difference in society, and that Iraqis really do want U.S. troops out now
chaotic and terrible though the situation is in Iraq today, there are certain things that ultimately are going to have to be decided by the Iraqis themselves and done by the Iraqis themselves. There's not much we can do except one day apologize and pay reparations. But to say we have broken it, therefore we're going to have to put the pieces together, no, that's to compound the error.
And they try to rule the world on the...
In there?
Yeah, there, inside.
They are meeting to make a decision how to run the world. How to run the world, actually.
Yeah.
We are very committed to making sure that our government does not try to buy and sell all of your industries to big corporations. We believe that is your choice. What happens to your economy, not President Bush's.
The major disease that is threatening the health of the Iraqi society is basically privatization of the different sectors in Iraq.
Bremer's decisions when he was running Iraq are still hurting the workers. Decisions that aimed at forcing privatization in Iraq.
What is the role of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in Iraq?
ما هو الدور الذي يلعبه؟
شكرا جزيلا.
We did not have anything from the IMF, the World Bank, nor the WTO. They will try to impose conditions for private investments and free trade, which would be disastrous for Iraq.
What the U.S. is doing in Iraq is an experiment in privatization. You know, it's what we're fighting here, and you know, and what our country is doing in Iraq is trying to privatize an entire country.
So when you speak of privatization,
إذن عندما تتكلمون عن الخصخصة
I understand the vicious game that's being played. The same type of thinking which brings an illegal war and denies workers basic rights is the same type of thinking which advances privatization, all in the name of the dollar bill.
To those who argue today that stability must precede political democracy, which in turn must precede the construction of civil organizations like unions, I ask, where in the history of any country was the struggle for political democracy not driven by securing the economic welfare of the mass of people? And where has that economic welfare struggle not been led by independent trade union movements?
We know that the workers form the majority of the population of every society, and giving them the right to organize themselves as an independent entity, it is the only way to form a democratic society that maintains the human rights, based on non-discriminatory, this is very hard word.
We are working hard for the participation of women in every workplace and in the trade unions.
There are all kinds of forces in Iraq. Among them are the labor movement. Among them are trends that cut across sectarian or ethnic divisions. There are also other trends that want either sectarian hegemony or the destruction of Iraq or a narrow religious vision of the future. My hope is that this first set of categories, including the labor movement, can have, if not a preponderant influence, at least a strong enough influence to guarantee rights for everybody.
I think we would be extraordinarily proud that as we look back to this meeting a few years from now, that we've helped create the kind of union movement that you want in Iraq. You cannot have a free democratic society in any country, without a free, strong labor movement. That's what we have to build together.
إن أي انتصار نحققه سيكون انتصارا لكل عمال العالم ولكل القوى التحررية والمتمدنة.
Any victory we achieve in Iraq, it is going to be a victory for all the international labor movement.
I think it's really important that average Americans get to hear directly from the Iraqis, and nothing replaces having that interaction, that communication, and hearing from them themselves what's actually taking place.
When we meet face to face, we find out we're human beings with all the same feelings, and these are not terrorists, these are our brothers.
So when American workers hear directly from Iraqis, in a people-to-people direct way, unmediated, uninterrupted by other voices, there's a connection. And people feel that, yes, we do have something in common. Yes, we really are united in a common struggle and a common interest.
And it's important to hear from that community of folk, particularly so that we can come to judgments and decisions that are appropriate and just in the United States.
We have got to come together if we're truly going to stand in unity and solidarity with these workers from Iraq and with the people from Iraq. Bring the troops home now. Stop the war. Come together in unity and let's begin to bring into existence the peace. God bless you.
After 10 days' travel to 25 cities, everyone returned to Washington, D.C. for a final day of intense work.
We've created a document that is a joint document of the three unions and U.S. law that states our common position of our opposition to the occupation, to the privatization of Iraq, and to the central role that we believe labor law and labor unions play in the future of Iraq. It was a very powerful process, if for no other reason, because of course it was conducted in Arabic. There was intense arguments among the Iraqis about the details. They cared about it passionately. The single biggest issue of contention was how to deal with the issue of secularism. We were dealing with people that included Iraqis from Basra, where 95% of the members were devout Shiites. They didn't want the word secular in the document.
If I give my constituents statements with words like multilateralism, secularism, discrimination, they will throw it in my face.
We need this document, and we ask you to come up with something that you both can agree with for the sake of international solidarity.
They were totally exhausted. But we had a mission. We had to finish with this statement. And we worked intensively for hours. And the clock was ticking because they had to get on that plane. There was no other planes to get on. And finally, with some little backroom maneuvering among the different Iraqi groups, they said, "We got it." Okay. We translated into Arabic, signed the Arabic and the English documents, and it's gone over the internet all over the world.
Everyone agreed to accept basic ILO and United Nations commitments to a society based on non-discrimination and respect for all individuals. Building on the momentum of the tour, affiliates of U.S. Labor Against the War brought many resolutions opposing the continued occupation of Iraq to the AFL-CIO National Convention, the highest decision-making body in the American labor movement. The widespread interest generated by the tour gave unprecedented legitimacy to these demands.
Honor the soldiers, provide them with the equipment they need, and bring them home. And bring them home.
There were 16 resolutions against the war, most of them calling for immediate or withdrawal or end of the occupation that were submitted to the AFL-CIO to go to the convention floor.
The next resolution, Resolution 53, the war in Iraq, deals with our country's military involvement in Iraq, clearly a difficult and contentious issue. It calls for our troops to be brought home as quickly as possible.
We feel that that didn't accurately reflect the sentiment of those 16 resolutions, because as soon as possible leads the discretion up to the Bush administration to decide what's possible. And I could easily hear Bush and Rumsfeld say, I'm sorry, it just won't be possible for many years to come.
I rise today to offer a friendly amendment. It would simply change the words as quickly as possible to rapidly.
All those in favor of the friendly amendment signify by the sign of aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. You are friendly, brother.
Speakers from unions across the country rose to call for rapid withdrawal of U.S. troops, condemning the lies that led to the war and the waste of money that would better be used for domestic needs, and supporting the desires of Iraqi workers.
They want an end to the U.S. occupation. They want it now, if not yesterday.
Before you is Amendment Resolution 53. Debate has been closed. We'll vote on the amended resolution. All those in favor signify by the sign of aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and so ordered.
This is the debate that we wanted to have, and I hope we continue to have these kind of debates about the U.S. foreign policy in every venue, make sure that we continue to do the right thing.
For the first time, really in the history of the American labor movement, there is a position being taken that's contrary to the official views of the U.S. government in time of war.
Working class unions!
The labor movement fundamentally is the voice of working class America.
Kick-ass union!
These are the people we want in the movement, because that's what makes a movement ultimately very powerful. And the labor movement has the ability, right off the bat, to reach 15 million or more of those people. So we need to take advantage of that power.
The fact that U.S. Labor Against the War has affiliates from both sides of the major divisions that's now plaguing the AFL-CIO is a very significant element that it tends to unite and bring together working people in this country. So that if we have a labor movement that it pays attention to and mobilizes its own members around the issues of war and peace and around a reasonable and humane foreign policy, I think that that will be a very significant force for change in American foreign policy and for an end of the war.
I, as a long-time member of this labor movement, am so proud. This is my proudest moment being a union member, because in all of the 49 years that I've been coming to these conventions, this is the first time we had the moral courage to stand up and say enough is enough. Thank you so very much.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong.